And it is 9 o'clock sharp. Welcome, everybody. I can tell we're in very different places because people are wearing different things, right? We are a little bit slower than usual today to have people join on. So I'll listen to myself talk while people do log on. We want to welcome our diverse and fabulous tribe. People who are together for the long game, immediate gains plus systems corrections, plus cultural shifts will equal a community where we can all truly thrive. Now, I always say emotions are a good indicator of things that need our attention. And so we invite you each and all to join us to get slightly infuriated, or at least amazed with the who knew about some of these facts. Much of the information you're going to hear today is going to take us to an emotional place and give us facts that we can take back with us to our networks and to our circles when we leave here today. Because you are the Women's Fund and we can drive these conversations. So I want to say that this incredible group of humans on the next slide that's half of our board. And let's see the other half. We have a great announcement for everybody today. Since 2016, the Women's Fund has done a lot of amazing grants and given the seed funding to incredible organizations. Then in 2016, we stopped. But in 2021, we started again. And we've just released our first RFP, and that's on our webpage. And we ask all of our community partners to share it with everybody. We're going to talk about that more later, especially with Shamila, because we've got some really interesting insights into how the lack of quality early child care and learning can be truly prohibitive, not only in our economic mobility pillar, but also in our leadership pillar, and I would say in our health and well-being pillar, because we're all going to go crazy if the kids are not all right. Right. So please do share this widely. I think there are a lot of grassroots organizations and a lot of people in our hometown who've got solutions that can fit some of these gaps. So please do share widely. And onward we go to thanking so many of our former board members are signed up today in addition to our current board members. You know who you are, fabulous people. As I mentioned, we have elected officials today. We have Office of Mayor Daniela Levine Cava with us today, the Office of Commissioner Ken Russell, who's also running for a state office as well. Community partners, terrific community partners. Thank you for being here and for sharing this information. Direct service providers and our proudly 87-year-old founder, Marilyn Gladstone. Thank you for your leadership. Donors for your fuel. Can't do it without you. And onwards we go. 2, thanking V and 1 Billion Rising for their consistent support and solidarity in 2021 by empowering this Impact Collaborative series. And on we go to thanking our attorneys who are here, knowing that we're going to gather together with our friends from the courts, et cetera, on January 13th. Serious networking for a serious cause. We will see you there. And onward, Kami. 2, we have our gender equity dashboard, which is the second huge program that we just have launched within the last 2 months. Many of you here locally will have seen us on the front page of the Miami Herald 2 weeks ago, looking at our focus on facts and how the gender data gap is very prejudicial to allowing us to move forward. This is what I call the proverbial stone soup. We have an amazing beginning of this basic stats on each of our 4 pillars. And today's pillar is leadership, a focus on leadership. This is your Women's Fund. It's your website. Help us to grow that gender equity dashboard. And we're all going to feed from it to make this a better place for women and girls. And onward to our introduction of our incredible keynote speaker today, representing nationally what we're talking about locally. Welcome, Jordan Brooks. Take it away.
Thank you so much. It is such a pleasure to be here with you all today. And I know some of you or most of you are in Miami, and I wish I were there instead of here in Washington, D.C. But as Maria mentioned, I'm Jordan Brooks. I'm the executive director of the United States of Women. And so much of everything that you are talking today is exactly what we talk about on a daily basis here. And I would be remiss to not mention obviously what we all saw yesterday in the Supreme Court. I'm here in Washington specifically for the Supreme Court arguments and to be in solidarity with my incredible friends who are leading the reproductive justice fight here. And I will say it was obviously a disappointing day, but it is such an illustration of how all of the intersections of issues come together across women's lives and lives of those who identify as women. And I just want to make sure we are all constantly thinking about, and I know Jennifer will talk a little bit more about this later, but really thinking about how we can do everything we can to help our friends in the abortion access movement and help our friends who are fighting every day for reproductive justice in this country, because it's going to be a hard year. And it already has been. So I wanted to start there, but then obviously move us to something slightly more positive and happy. You know, I'm really thrilled here to be with you all at the Impact Collaborative because our friends at the Women's Fund of Miami-Dade are really walking the walk of everything that we talk about on a national basis every day. And really the pillars that you all work on, from leadership and health access to ending violence against women, are everything that we talk about every day and everything that we want to make sure we are integrating the gender lens onto in every way. But I think, you know, what is really interesting is, you know, we think about issues that are gender issues, like particularly abortion access or like childcare or like paid leave. But I want to challenge us a little bit. And I think our friends at the Women's Fund also want to challenge us a little bit to think about the fact that every issue is a gender issue. Here at the United States of Women, which is a national organization, I forgot to tell you, the United States of Women is a national organization really dedicated to bringing together organizations and individuals across the country to really take action on a whole host of gender issues and give people the specific actions they can take every day to get us closer to gender equity in every way. And we, over the course of the last year, really started to say that every issue is a gender issue because we know that the intersections of everyone's lives, women's lives, people who identify as women's lives, aren't just about healthcare, right? If you're thinking about healthcare, that also really impacts your economic security. If you have been a survivor of violence, that also impacts your health. All of these sort of things are really intersectional. And so, you know, I know our friends at the Women's Fund of Miami-Dade think about this every day. I'm really excited to see their dashboard. But I want us to challenge us today to open our minds a little bit to think about what gender issues are. Because I think you'll hear from every single one of our friends, from Sarah, from Jennifer, from Morgan, and from Shamila today, some really interesting gender issues that you may not think of every day. Some of them that we like to talk about at the United States of Women are, for instance, did you know that 2/3 of all student loan debt in the United States is held by women? 17% of women are more likely to be killed in a car crash because cars have been designed with anatomically male crash test dummies. You'll hear a little bit about some anatomically male issues that Sarah's going to talk about a little later as well. 66% of tipped workers, those in restaurants, gig workers, are women. And the poverty rate for those tipped workers is 2.5 times higher than the overall rate. You'll hear Shamila talk a little bit more about that today. We also like to talk about issues that, you know, sometimes we think of as gender issues, but aren't talked about as much. For instance, menstrual equity. We don't like to talk about that because some people are embarrassed to talk about that. We shouldn't be. 1 in 5 girls in the US leaves school early or misses a day of school every year because they aren't able to obtain a period product. That is something we can solve in this country. That is something we can solve on a local basis. And so, you know, I want us to think today a little bit about how we can unpack all of the issues, whether that's on trade policy or transportation policy, or on the minimum wage, and think about how that affects women and girls. And particularly, I also want to challenge us to think about the intersections of race and gender here. A lot of the work that we do at the United States of Women is really making sure that we are thinking about how people's lives are affected by their identities every day, and how different policy issues will affect different people's lives based on their identities and where they come from as well. So a lot of that, I will say, we know works. And the reason we built Every Issue is a Gender Issue, and the reason that we and our friends at the Miami-Dade Women's Fund also think about this is because we know that if you overlay a gender lens on every single policy issue, you're going to make everybody's life better, right? A rising tide lifts all boats. And so this came for us from when we were inside the White House Council on Women and Girls at the Obama administration. The powers that be, our friends, the president and the vice president at the time, now the president, really thought about the fact that they wanted to make sure, while they were building the council, which was very different from an office on women in several other administrations, they wanted to make sure there was a representative from literally every office in the White House and every federal agency. And that was because they wanted to make sure that even the people who were talking about transportation policy at the Department of Transportation, or even the people at the National Security Agency who were talking about all of our national security across the board, were thinking about a gender lens. And so when we left the White House, we really made sure that that was exactly what we were talking about too. And I'm very proud to say our friends now who have built the White House Council on Gender Equity, the Gender Policy Council, are doing the exact same thing. And they are putting out incredible papers and really working with all across the board on all of those issues to make sure that we are building a gender lens across the board. But the other thing we knew inside the White House was, and now know at the United States of Women, is that solutions aren't happening on a national level. I love Congress, but it takes a long time for them to get anything done. What we do know is that people like you in Miami, or people across the country, are the ones who are providing solutions and who are able to make real change concretely in your communities. So I want to challenge you all today to make sure that you're thinking about every way that you can take action, that you can put a gender lens on everything you're thinking about. I know that we at the United States of Women are here to support you, and we are here to work with you all to make sure you can take action on a daily basis in your lives. And I'm just so thrilled to be here with you today, and to have you all hear from my friends, Sarah, Jennifer, Shamila, and Morgan. We're going to talk a little bit more about those really exciting intersectional gender issues that you may not think about, but think about us when you're interested in thinking about new gender issues, and we're here to help. So thank you all for all of your work, and we're really excited to see what you do with it. Have a great one.
Amazing. Thank you. It's amazing to have this national powerhood. We have people from the Women's Funding Network. Good morning, Megan, on here as well. And it's just really great to know to share the messaging and how we get out to people. It's priceless. Thank you each and all for being here. So we're going to tell you how this works. There are a few mechanics that ensure that you please, even though we can't see you in this central plaza, which is, our attendees, we need you to participate. We're going to be conducting the 3 polls that keep us connected. There's number 1. You know that we're going to have our exit poll afterwards. And more importantly than anything, there are scores and scores and scores of people who wanted to be here today, but they're in class. They've got billable hours. We've got all the leaders who are really into this material. Everybody knows within 24 hours, this will be live on our website, will be live on our YouTube, and that we want you to share. You can cut a different piece of Virginia. You hear from Girls Inc. who are on today, Malia from LEAP. You know that you can take a piece of this and share it with your networks and your colleagues. So please do go ahead and do so. So onward, I'm going to do these people are used to challenges, all of our panelists, and we're going to challenge them to introduce themselves in 2 minutes or less in context of today's topic. Please take it away, Sarah.
Oh, hi guys. Okay, my name is Sarah Collinson and I'm Managing Director at Joan Creative, which is an independent women-founded creative agency in New York. And apologies in advance if you hear a shrieking in the background. It is not a dinosaur, it is my 6-month-old. So apologies if that happens. And as you can tell from my accent, I am not American, but I've lived in New York for nearly 8 years. So I think that qualifies me to claim that I'm a New Yorker. I think that's just long enough. And like I said, Joan is founded by women, 2 wonderful women called called Jamie Robinson and Lisa Clooney, and hopefully sometime soon that won't be unusual, but for now it really, really is. We're one of the few. And we work with really big global brands. We work with eBay, we work with S&P, we work with Fitbit, but we also work on causes that we really care about, usually pro bono, usually after hours, late nights, early mornings. And we sometimes work with existing companies. For example, we do a lot of work with the Potential Energy Coalition. And I bring this up because we actually did a campaign last year to convince Floridians that climate change is real, called Save Florida Man. So using the cultural meme of Florida Man. So check that out if you haven't seen it. But we also come up sometimes with our own IP, and that's intellectual property. So that is new ideas, new thinking that is not driven by another company. And that is what I'm here to discuss with you all today, the Womannequin project. And more to come on that later.
Very exciting. And we have some things about Florida and climate too that we want to share with you. We also have a cutting edge campaign, Sarah. More to discuss. Morgan, special shout out to Morgan, who was really instrumental in bringing us all together. Thank you, Morgan. Take it away.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I'm Morgan Johnson. I'm the Assistant Director of Programs at the United States of Women, and I use she, her pronouns. And I'm so excited to be here with you all today. I don't often do panels like this, and so this is a new experience for me. And that's something that I'm going to talk about a little bit later. But like Jordan said, the United States of Women is here to be a resource for people who want to take action every day on these issues that my fellow panelists will discuss a little bit later. But the United States of Women, we want to be a resource and we want to bring people together, and that is exactly what we need to do. Unite, be together, work together to make issues, to make change on these issues. And that's a little bit what I will talk about later on.
Terrific. Thank you. Shamila, welcome.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. It's so great to feel your energy virtually. My name is Shamila Ruiz. I'm the Communications Director at One Fair Wage. My pronouns are she, hers. I'm also a proud daughter of immigrants, and I'm here to talk a little bit today about the topic of labor and tipped workers in the service sector specifically, and how that contributes to race and gender inequality in America. I'm also a former restaurant worker who's had to live off of tips, so I come to this work through lived experience and would love to hear from you all if you've ever worked for tips or as a service worker before in the chat. And so for those of you who don't know, One Fair Wage is a national organization, campaign and coalition seeking a full minimum wage for all workers in the United States to lift millions of tipped and sub-minimum wage service industry workers across the country out of poverty, empower these workers through political education and civic education, and work towards achieving greater racial equity and reducing sexual harassment and gender-based violence against women at work. We do this through policy shift, industry shift, and narrative and culture shift work. So we work on federal campaigns and state campaigns to raise a sub-minimum wage, but we've also published research on the topic, books on the topic, including the latest book just published by our co-founder and president, Saru Jayaraman, called One Fair Wage, Ending Sub-Minimum Pay in America. Encourage everybody to check it out, as well as 2 films on the topic and other earned media. And so the focus of my work will be, the focus of my conversation this morning will be talking about COVID's devastating impact on the economy and how it's had far-reaching consequences for all workers, especially women and mothers in the service sector. So really looking forward to diving in with you all.
Again, an incredible meshing of gears with work that we're doing. Thank you so much, Shamila, for being here. Jennifer, thank you for taking your valuable time. Welcome.
Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Jennifer Weisswolf. I'm also here in New York City. I was actually just thinking about the New Yorker status. I've lived here for 53, going on 54 years. So I'm going to say definitely a New Yorker. So somewhere around the corner from Sarah, I imagine. But I am a vice president and fellow here at the Brennan Center for Justice, which is a legal advocacy and think tank affiliated with NYU School of Law. And while our core issues are on democracy and justice and access to the ballot, I've somehow managed to weave that into the idea that menstruation and menstrual access are also key democratic engagement issues that have been fully underserved certainly in American society. So I've written a book called Periods Gone Public and created a nonprofit called Period Equity, in which I focus on gender equity through the lens and frame of menstruation and how we treat menstruation in American society. And I think that maybe even the title of this talk, the pink tax, it runs such a wide gamut of what people think the pink tax means. And they often associate it with menstruation and the tampon tax. So I think that creates sort of a wide runway to talk about issues of economic equity, gender equity, and menstrual equity. So I hope to be able to be that glue in the rest of the conversation that others are having. And I'm really excited to hear about their work as well.
Amazing. And here we are all together doing exciting, exciting work. Now we're going to go to what's really going on. What are you seeing? We're going to go in the same order, and we're going to ask you what you saw and what was happening, what we needed to deal with. And we're going to start with you, Sarah.
Hello again. Sorry, the eternal struggle to get off mute in this day and age. Okay, the issue. So this issue came to our attention quite randomly. Our CEO just read an article that mentioned, almost in passing, not the main subject of the article, just a little piece in there, that women are almost a third less likely to get bystander CPR than men, and therefore less likely to survive cardiac arrest. So to put that in context of figures, only 1 in 8 women survive cardiac arrest compared to 1 in 5 men, which is a really, really big difference. And this was a bit of a what the fuck moment in the Joan office. So we did a bit of digging and found that the stat originated in a study by Dr. Audrey Bluer at Duke University. And it's primarily due to 3 things. So number 1, people actually don't know that women have heart attacks. They think it's a male issue. So think about it. When have you ever seen a woman having a heart attack in a movie? Not really ever, right? It's always a man that falls down to the ground. And it just contributes to this perception that cardiovascular issues are male issues only. But cardiovascular disease is the main cause of death of women in America. 1 woman dies of this approximately every minute, which is really crazy, right? Think of that. Every single minute a woman dies of this issue, but people don't really know that it's an issue. So that's number 1. Number 2, boobs. People don't want to touch them. People are uncomfortable about it. People go in and then they hesitate. And when it's a life or death issue, you cannot have hesitation. So boobs are a big issue. And then number 3, when people do try to give CPR to women, so when they realize that she's having a heart attack, when they get over the boobs problem, they actually don't do it correctly. So they don't push hard enough due to fear of hurting her, and they don't position their hands properly, again, due to boobs. So that is the issue in a nutshell. So women are less likely to get bystander intervention in cardiac arrest and are therefore much more likely to die.
Talk about conversation starters and something to do, something about.
Totally. It was one of these things, and the discovery of it was really one of those moments of somebody in the office just reading a piece of information, latching onto it, questioning that piece of information. It was just a little comment in an article. Everyone at Joan diving on top of it, researching it, looking into it, looking at the study behind it, and really uncovering that this is a major, major problem.
Amazing. Talk about people who show up. Morgan Johnson, take it away.
Thank you so much. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the issues that the United Women is focusing on. In addition to everyone who's on this panel, we amplify all of our partners' issues, but some things that are not going to be discussed with our wonderful panelists here that I like to share that are really important, I think, and also a gender and racial justice lens. So Black girls are 7 times more likely to be suspended in school and 4 times more likely to be arrested and 3 times more likely to be referred to law enforcement than their white girl peers. That's one thing. We're talking about access to education here and how the perception of Black girls often puts them in more harm in their own school buildings. Like Jordan had mentioned earlier, we work with our partners at Verity Now to really bring awareness around car accidents and how that disproportionately impacts women. So women are 17% more likely to be killed in a crash because cars have been designed around the bodies of male crash test dummies. And women are 73% more likely than men to be injured in a vehicle crash because of this issue. So our partners at Verity Now are really working to get vehicle crash testing standards and practices updated to better understand the safety needs of a broader range of body types. The last thing I will say that is incredibly important and probably affects so many of you today is that women do carry roughly 2/3 of all student loan debt, but Black women are disproportionately impacted by this issue, and they carry the most student loan debt of any racial and ethnic group. And that is one way that Black women face economic harm and dangers in this country. And so all of these issues are gender issues. We may not think about it when we think of student loan debt. We might think it's a very personal issue, something that we just had to do in order to go to school. And many of us did take the option to take student loans, but so many women take student loan debt, and then it impacts their lives, and it really kind of keeps them in this place that really harms them economically for the rest of their lives and their families' lives. And we all know that women and girls are a huge part of the family unit that really keep it together. And when they have so much debt and they have so much economic harm on them, it's really hard to progress and move forward and take care of their families and their own needs as they need to. The same thing with access to education and with the bodily harm that women face just because car crash test dummies are not accounting for their bodies. All of these things make it really hard for women and girls to thrive. And I know that the other panelists will talk a little bit more about other issues that really impact women and girls. But here at the United States of Women, we want to continue to amplify all of these issues and help you all take action, which I'll talk a little bit about the solution to these things a little bit later. But just wanted to share these stats up front to be a part of this conversation. USOW is not by any means the expert in these issues, but we really want to raise awareness and bring partners to the forefront like you all. So it's so incredible to see the work that the Women's Fund is doing with their dashboard and bringing data to light. Without that data, without that research, without our stories, without us telling our voices, these things will not be known. And so I'm just really happy to share these stats with you and continue to have the conversation about how we can solve these issues.
Truly stronger together. So much going on. And you've got somebody declaring themselves, and she's pretty powerful and she's really ticked off. So far you're getting people emotional. Go team here. Shamila.
Yeah, I'm so proud to follow Morgan because what you just said, Morgan, is so kind of indicative of how people think about the minimum wage, which is the issue that I work on specifically. When people think about the Fight for 15, they might not think of it necessarily as a gender equity issue or a racial equity issue. But if you think about who are the workers who are being harmed by sub-minimum wages in America, the large majority of them are women, BIPOC workers, and those in our society who have been given less resources. So the devastating impact of COVID specifically on our economy, as we know, has had far-reaching consequences for all workers, especially for women and mothers in the service sector. Prior to the pandemic, the restaurant industry specifically was one of the largest and fastest growing sectors in our economy. As I mentioned previously, it accounted for over 13 million workers, but despite the size and growth of the restaurant industry in previous years, our workers earned some of the lowest wages in the country. Over 60% of all workers are paid below the federal minimum wage, which is something that folks might not know, and therefore rely heavily on tips for their base wage. This is a literal legacy of slavery. The federal subminimum wage for tipped workers is still just $2.13 an hour. 43 states continue this legacy of slavery, including in Florida, where the tipped minimum wage is $6.98. And these 43 states persist with a subminimum wage in some form. The subminimum wage disproportionately places a burden on women who make up nearly 70% of the workforce, as Morgan mentioned, or female identifying workers. And over a third of these workers are mothers who must rely on tips to support their families. Tipped workers suffer from nearly twice the poverty rate and use food stamps at a greater rate than the rest of the US workforce. And they face the highest rates of sexual harassment of any other industry because they have to tolerate inappropriate customer behavior to feed their families. In December of 2021, we published a report called Take Your Mask Off, So I Know How Much to Tip You. And in that report, we collected stories from over 3,000 workers who were told throughout the pandemic from customers. They were hearing comments from customers like, well, you have to pull down your mask so I know how much to tip you. How could I ever decide how much to tip you if I can't see how pretty you are? And we heard from workers who, like in DC, a worker named Defoma, who would reject these advances, which were literally putting their lives at risk, right? At the height of the pandemic, the CDC said that the restaurant industry was one of, if not the most dangerous places to work in September of 2020. And we heard from a worker named Defoma who had a customer ask her to pull down her mask. And she said, no, I don't feel safe doing that. And moreover, I'd get in trouble. And he said, well, then I guess you won't eat tonight. And so that just really shows the power that customers know that they have on tipped service workers as a result of this literal legacy of slavery and this oppressive system that has worked for decades and centuries even to keep workers earning so little wages and having to rely on tips for the majority of their income. And I just want to close by something that's a quote that sticks with me. And as we talk about this issue from a racial and gender lens, my Congresswoman, the amazing Congress member Ayanna Pressley, spoke at a town hall with us a few months back. And she said something that is just so indicative of the work that we do and the work that this Impact Collaborative is bringing to light, which is that these racial and gender disparities, and we have to be intersectional about it, right? These intersectional injustices are not naturally occurring. They are legislated and they have been codified. So if we can legislate hurt and harm, creating marginalized communities, we can also legislate communities that are equitable and just and where everyone can thrive. So I'm looking forward to, in the next section, diving into some solutions, but just wanted to frame the issue for everybody with some of the background and context.
Trying to keep myself under control. Jennifer, take it away.
I love that. I love that line, and that's actually a really good seg, I think, to the way I want to start framing issues of menstrual access. So I'm going to tell a little bit of my own sort of genesis story too, as Sarah did at the start, which is I stumbled into this issue fully. I had no expectation of becoming a person who became obsessed with talking about periods and period policy. On New Year's Day, 2015, so almost 7 years ago exactly, I was busy posting pictures of my New Year's revelry on Facebook and stumbled across a post that had been put up by a mom in my community that she and her two kids, who are 11 and 14 years old, were collecting tampons and pads for the community food pantry because they had discovered this need. And beyond, sort of wanting to immediately participate in their donation drive, the wheels started turning in my head why a food pantry would know of this need, not be in a position to use its own budget or otherwise meet what seemed to be a systemic need, and instead we're having kids collect these products. And that became sort of the rallying cry to me as I became aware of this idea and the need of menstrual access, and that there were whole communities in my own backyard and across the country for whom menstrual products were unaffordable or inaccessible. It was beyond whether or not we needed to be doing collection drives to meet the need. It was really examining and understanding what was missing in our lawmaking and in our policies when it came to menstruation. And as I started to unpack that just by looking at law after law, federal laws, sort of state health codes, tax codes, you name it, I discovered two things: that menstruation was avoided, and when it wasn't avoided, it was wholly inconsistent from policy to policy, how it was dealt with or how it was regarded. And it was always, with no exception, to the detriment of people who actually menstruated. So where the IRS had a chance to weigh in, or the FDA had to weigh in, had a chance to weigh in, or OSHA had a chance to weigh in, or there were local tax codes or local health codes, it was always, whatever the outcome was, it meant that menstrual products weren't made safer, weren't made more affordable, weren't made more accessible. An example being that the IRS tax code had, up until 2020, and the pandemic actually created an opportunity to legislate away this inequity. But up until then, the IRS had considered and they went out of their way to describe how menstrual products were not actually created or used to meet a particular medical need, but in fact were considered something lesser, a hygiene and grooming item. And the practical outcome of that classification meant that where there were opportunities to leverage savings, as in flexible savings account allowances and health savings account allowances, to purchase particular medical necessities with pre-tax dollars, menstrual products were not allowed to be used that way. Interestingly, the FDA goes out of its way to call menstrual products a medical device, but they put it in a classification that is so low that it requires at the absolute minimum in terms of transparency and testing and sharing of information across health agencies federally. So this was sort of the upon learning about this community need, my instinct was to want to think of it as a systemic need or a systemic question. And then upon discovering that our laws do nothing to serve the need of menstruation, or the fact of menstruation, or the reality that half the population menstruates likely at some point in their lives and for an extensive chunk of their lives, creating laws and policies and a social reality to rectify that became my bizarre side job mission.
Well, thank you for taking up what crosses your path. We keep on talking as we keep on iterating as our Women's Fund and keep on growing. You know, what are we now, 30 years since we began? And we talk about the different gears coming closer and closer and closer to starting to mesh and creating more and more power. So one of our sort of nascent committees is legislative and advocacy, because if you don't look at some of those things as well, all the grant making, all the convening, it's amazing. Thank you for your work. So now is the most exciting part, which is the solutions part, because this is, you never deflate somebody, leave them on the floor. The world's not a bad place. This is a place that needs a lot of action from a lot of us. So we're looking for your calls to action and your solutions. And we're going to start again with you, Ms. Sarah.
And just quickly, Jennifer, I loved what you just said. Like, I don't think anyone at Joan thought that they were going to become these sort of, not experts, but, you know, just thinking about CPR every minute of the day, running around Manhattan, lugging CPR mannequins in their spare time. So yeah, totally hear you on that one. Okay, the solution, so the good bit. So we had an idea. It's actually a very, very simple idea. So I think we're going to play you guys just a quick video, and then I will talk a little bit more about it. So hit play. Here's a very difficult lesson. 1 in 4 women will die from heart disease. And yet, when they are in cardiac arrest in public, women are 27% less likely to receive bystander CPR than men. Why? Well, scientifically speaking, boobs. According to research, they confuse people. Where do you place your hands? Will I hurt her? Is it even okay to touch? Like everything else, the solve lies in education. For the past 50 years, we have been learning on these, which clearly don't have these. So let's add some. Seriously, that's it. Womanikin is an attachment with breasts that turns any traditional CPR mannequin into a womanikin, and its open source design is free to download by any organization. If we can normalize performing CPR on a woman's body in training, we will see changes in real life. Let's kill the stigma that's killing women. Find out more at womanikin.org. Awesome. So the Womanikin is a universal open source attachment to give flat-chested CPR training mannequins breasts. It's very simple. And we had two aims this work. Number one is just to drive general awareness of women's heart health and the need for CPR. Creating a product, a film, a website is going to drive conversation and awareness of this issue. Secondly, make CPR training more gender inclusive. Firstly, by training in the physical action of giving CPR to someone with breasts. And secondly, serving as an education device. As you can imagine, seeing that in a class really sparks conversation and discussion. Interestingly, our first solution was to create a CPR dummy with breasts, but we quickly realized that that was very impractical. Firstly, it would be very costly, and CPR organizations don't have a lot of money. And secondly, who wants to carry two of those things around? Like I said, we were carrying them around Manhattan, going to hunt out doctors to chat to, and let me tell you, those things are bulky. So the mannequin is a very simple attachment, can be fitted to any standard CPR mannequin. It's actually made of neoprene, it has a zip, it can fold away, it's super, super easy. So we built a product, we built a brand, and we launched it around CPR week. And the response was truly, truly amazing. We had over 25 million social media impressions, articles written worldwide. Our founder was invited onto our Full Frontal with Samantha Bee. And most importantly, we were adopted by over 50 organizations worldwide and counting. One quite funny fact is that we were given a donation of $10,000 in Facebook ads, but they were banned because they were flagged as pornography. Jordan will remember that whole thing very, very well, trying to get them live. So to get involved in this, like you saw in the film, visit womannequin.org, the website, share the information with any CPR trainer you know, anyone who's doing CPR. The design is free. We were very, very clear this needs to be free and easy. You can just download the design, you can create the design. We have actually, through Joan, we have a production arm, Joan Studios, we've also made Womannequin. So if there's an organization that wants them made, we can also do that. We actually received a request, I was saying to Myra at the start of the call, earlier this week from a CPR team who ordered Womannequins right at the start, so back in 2019. And obviously things have been a bit quiet during 2020, seeing as in-person classes have stopped, but they've just emailed requesting a whole new order of Womannequins because they've had such good feedback by all of their trainers. They're really seeing the effect happening. So it's a really, really exciting time. We would love your help and support.
Coach Villano, that one is for you, sir. Talking about it last night. We know where you can order that. Ransom Everglades doesn't only have somebody asking a question today, was one of our impact agents, but also has a coach here. I see a first Womannequin in Miami coming soon. Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. Morgan, please.
Here's a very difficult lesson. Oh God, not my voice again.
Of course. Okay, so to talk about solutions. So like I said, USOW, our kind of path lane in this movement is to really make the connections and to really support people on the ground who are already doing this work, amplifying the work that they're doing and making it a little bit more easier for people to take action on these issues. And so we really truly do believe every issue is a gender issue. And that sounds huge, right? It sounds like a big mountain. Every issue is a gender issue. What does that mean? It means that everywhere we look, our identity as women, our identity, our race, our ethnicity, our social status, our economic background really impacts how we move in this world and how issues impact us. And so really, when we say every issue is a gender issue and what the solution is, it's really looking within. It's really understanding who you are, talking to people about things that are impacting you, issues that you care about, issues that are impacting your family and your friends. We all have the power within ourselves to change those issues. By building community, by raising awareness, by taking action. And so USOW really is just trying to do that, really raise awareness and tell women that you already have the power within yourself to take action and make change on these issues. So we have what we call our action network, which really breaks down different issue areas that impact women at the intersection of race and gender, and just gives you an easier way to take action, whether that's sending out a tweet to raise awareness or calling your Congress member to get them to take action on any legislative issue, or just sending a letter to your school board and telling them that they need to make a change to protect Black girls in schools. And so that's what we do here at the United States of Women. And like I said, we want to be a resource to the individuals on this call, as well as all the organizations and leaders, and really just bring us all together to take one united action on all of these issues, and really create community, raise awareness, and just together make a change so that all women and girls and marginalized genders can thrive.
Amazing. I'm in. We're in. Shamila.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Morgan, and to all the panelists for sharing all these amazing resources related to your causes, which, as we know, are all intersectional. Our biggest goal at One Fair Wage has been to involve the various stakeholders that make up the ecosystem of the service sector and other sectors for whom tips are considered wage replacement. So we do this by organizing workers, of course, first and foremost, to share their stories of resiliency, to share their stories and triumphs of working as tipped workers and working for sub-minimum wages. So if you go to our website, onefairwage.org/take-action, you'll find kind of a drop-down menu of how you can plug in. But we also involve other stakeholders. So we've been organizing what we call high road employers. These are employers who are prioritizing taking the high road to profitability by offering sustainable business practices and benefits to their employees and paying fair wages, setting them apart from the low road actors like the corporate giants like Applebee's and Denny's, who set these low road standards and lobby legislators to not pass minimum wage laws, to not pass paid sick time laws. And so we have a network of over 1,000 restaurants. You can also find those linked on that Take Action page. You can support these restaurants by voting with your dollars or your fork, so to speak. So you can find a full directory of One Fair Wage restaurants in your area. And we've also been educating stakeholders like investors to divest away from these large corporations and to put pressure on them to divest from using sub-minimum wages and to move to a full wage model. So by educating all these different stakeholders as to how they fit in and how they can positively impact change in the restaurant industry and the service sector specifically, we've had a lot of great success, but we all also need your help as consumers to not just support restaurants, but make your legislators aware of these issues, right? And make your voice heard as far as your support for the Federal Raise the Wage Act, which you can do by going to our website, which has a lot of great resources and a call script, and also downloadable information that you can share with your server the next time you go out to eat. So appreciate any and all support and attention to the issue of sub-minimum wages. And thank you so much to the Women's Fund for being able to put together this panel and to inform folks of this issue.
We have some community partners who work and have spoken on impact collaboratives before, Shamila, who are doing this kind of work. And we will make sure that Wendy and others get this message, get this impact collaborative. Jennifer.
So I think when it comes to menstruation, there's like a wide variety of solutions, and it's really been fascinating to see sort of a small but very integrated movement grow in this space. And from my perspective, at least in the 7 years that I've been involved with it. But again, I'm a lawyer, I'm a policy wonk, and my focus is on how to create policy solutions. So while there are all kinds of cultural and social and philanthropic and community ways that I think menstruation is worthy of our engagement and attention. And I know even around, I've worked with groups around the state of Florida and in Miami-Dade who do, extraordinary outreach and collection drives. All of that is obviously part of, sort of a bigger drive to normalize the conversation around menstruation, to destigmatize menstruation. And so policy becomes, I think, one of the primary solutions, because in my mind, it kind of does a double good. It changes the norm for everybody. It just changes the playing field, and it creates, sort of a new generation that just has different expectations. I always think about seatbelt laws. or smoking laws, and how, it wouldn't occur to my kids now to just throw the seatbelt across their shoulder, but I didn't grow up doing that. And it was creating laws that changed behavior and changed sort of baseline expectations. But then they also, can serve the greater good, and you can reach the most people with the broadest, with one fell swoop. And in the case of menstruation, I think you do a real service in normalizing it by making it something that's just expected to be talked about in the legislative context, in the economic context, in a policy and political context. And it turns out that, at least from a political perspective, menstruation, menstrual access, and menstrual equity has sort of surprising benefits to all sides of the aisle. And I don't know if we're supposed to be nonpartisan here or not. And I'm nonpartisan in my Brennan Center work, but
Yeah,
for period equity, I don't have to be super nonpartisan. But I will just say that, legislators of all stripes can find something to be for when it comes to menstrual access. So even if I'm on the opposing aisle on any other issue, there is an appetite to address this issue. And the sort of the key legislative agendas have been around, I guess we'll go back to the title, pink tax, the tampon tax, which is not actually the same vernacular as the pink tax, but the question of sales tax on menstrual products is one of the legislative campaigns that's been highly popular, highly successful. It's basically over the course of 6 years' time, starting in 2016, when 40 of the 50 states did not exempt menstrual products from sales tax, not deeming them a necessity worthy of creating an exemption for them like they do for other necessities like medical prescriptions and food. There are now 13 states that have legislated it away. And almost every state has actually introduced legislation. Florida is one of the states that did eliminate it legislatively, and it was then Governor Scott who signed it. So again, sort of showing that there's bipartisan appetite for it. Menstrual access legislation to require public agencies to ensure that menstrual products are considered in their budgets and provided to the clients or customers or constituents that they serve have also been a very popular piece of legislation. And over 24 states have legislated to mandate menstrual product provision in the schools, in their jails and prisons or detention centers or in emergency services. And then, as I mentioned at the start, even there's been action in Congress, although it's been sort of backdoor action, I would say. It's not been leading with the idea of menstrual access, but it's been folded into two major pieces of legislation, interestingly, that were both signed in a Republican-led Senate and by the former president. But that would be the CARES Act that changed or that made a modification to the IRS classification of menstrual products not as medical necessities, such that now they can be included in FSA and HSA allowances. And then a piece of criminal justice legislation, the First Step Act that was passed in 2018, which provides reforms both to people inside the criminal justice system and sentencing laws to make it so that less people get swept into it. Among the provisions was a menstrual product mandate to ensure that menstrual products are provided to people who are incarcerated in federal prisons. So I guess I'm saying all this stuff, assuming that people know that that's not the case, like that before these laws, there were just all of these places where menstruation was never considered, that while other products, toilet paper, paper towels were provided in school bathrooms, menstrual products were not, that for people who were incarcerated, it was not a given that they would receive a pad while they were on their period. So this has been, again, my solution has been to find every gap, every opening, every place that menstruation could and should be considered in our laws. And it's actually kind of stunning how many places it can be. And again, it's this gender lens, although I call it in my book a menstrual lens. Just bring that lens to any law and say, okay, well, does this impact anyone who menstruates? Chances are it does, because half of us walk around society impacted by laws. And then if that's the case, can we consider menstruation here? And if we can, we should. That's it. It's just as simple as it's simple. It's so simple. It's actually not that complicated. So anyway, that's my story of the solution in a quick couple of minutes. Happy to answer questions and think about ways, again, to weave them to everything that all the other panelists have talked about, because it is all inextricably interconnected.
Amazing, amazing segue. I want to read something that only the panelists and the host can see from one of our amazing interns who's actually going to ask one of the questions. She's in school right now, but somehow they let her watch this. She's creating a school assembly that they're going to replay this entire impact collaborative to her entire school. So it's amazing. But Alyssa Gonzalez wrote it to the panelists here. I'm working on making pads and tampons available in every bathroom in my school right now. Big smiley face and raw. So that takes us on to the amazing Q&A portion. And as I mentioned before, we have all these different gears that we're building and iterating as we come together in the Women's Fund. And one of those is the impact agent core, right? Really volunteer core. If people want to make a difference and they're ready to give the extra mile and check in with us and amplify even more. I mean, we're all doing it, but impact agents, are really making a commitment to do so. So of these impact agents, we have QR code, and our website's pretty darn good. Please sign up, all of you who want to, or share with people you think might want to volunteer with us. But we're going to go ahead to our first question from one of our amazing impact agents who couldn't get out of math class, but she's very, very present. This is one heck of a leader and volunteer. Jamora's first question, please, Vivi.
As a high school student, what can I do right now to combat the pink tax?
And this is the time that you all get to volunteer. Who'd like to take that first, panelists?
I'll jump in. And I guess I'll back us up a little bit, maybe to share a definition of the pink tax, because we haven't really talked about that. I've made a few referential comments about the tampon tax and the pink tax being, so often used sort of in the same breath. But I think we're all agreeing that the pink tax here is sort of shorthand for saying that there are seemingly neutral circumstances or laws or rules or expectations that we've all as panelists unpacked or shined a light on how they're not neutral at all, and that they can have highly disparate and discriminatory impact if we don't look at them through that lens. So to take it to the question about what can a student do, and at least on the issue that I've discussed, a student can do anything and everything. You can bring these issues to the attention of your communities, of your fellow students, your classmates, the leaders in your school who are students, who are adults, to your lawmakers, to your town hall, to your social media accounts, to everywhere where your voice wields influence. And the short answer to that is that it does wield influence everywhere. You can also you can speak your truths and speak your experience. I can have perhaps get in the door to talk to particular legislators about what I think the mechanics of the policy solution are to the issue of menstrual products in schools, but it's students who can speak to their own experience of what it feels like to be caught off guard, to not have those products available in the bathroom, to be sent to the nurse, to have to deal with something that you can deal with very quietly and easily by yourself, but becomes a bigger issue because of the backwards way that your school is approaching this issue, if that's the case. So that's my answer, is that there's nothing you can't do. Raise your voice and be creative about the solutions that you seek. I think that all of the people on this Zoom have talked about the way their lives shaped them to come to the point where they saw an inequity and chose to, use their own creative gifts and vision to solve it. But these are just ours. These are just the tip of the iceberg. there's so many more that young people especially have the capacity to take on. So that's my answer for you.
Fantastic. Who else has got a message for Jamora? Come on, Morgan. I know you do. You're looking for ambassadors. Like, excuse me, do I have to tip you on this one?
Thank you so much. I mean, that answer was absolutely perfect. It was amazing. I think I remember being a high school student and just being like, I can't wait until I'm 18 so I can vote. You don't have to wait until you're 18 to vote. I mean, you have to wait till you're 18 to vote legally, but you don't have to wait till you're 18 to really make an impact. You can have these conversations. You can use your story, just like Jennifer said, and your story is the most important thing that you have. Your experience is the most important thing that you have. It is the thing that will move people and get them to change their minds about issues. We do have an ambassador program at the United States of Women where we really encourage women and girls to use their own story and use their own experience to take action on these issues. We train them on how to tell their story. We train them on how to do advocacy, become activists, gender equity activists in their own communities. And so we do have that program available to folks who just want to learn just a little bit more about how to use their own power to make change. So I'll drop the link to the ambassador program in the chat.
That's fantastic. And our second question is a pre-recorded question from the self-same Alyssa. And our recording's a little bit low in volume, so everybody pump up your volume on your own computer to listen to Alyssa's question.
Hi everyone, my name is Alyssa Gonzalez and I'm 16 years old and I currently attend the Young Women's Preparatory Academy. And my question for you is, how do you think that my generation can implement new ways to stop things like the pink tax from occurring? Is it finding a way to pass the Equal Rights Amendment in Florida, or are there other strategies that we can use to stop this from happening in the future? Thank you.
It's a great public school young women's prep here in Miami-Dade. Shamila, I see you volunteering. Please take it away.
Yeah, I love that question. It is so timely. So as you know, I talked a lot about the history of the sub-minimum wage prior to the pandemic. As the pandemic has ravaged so many workers' lives, a lot of workers are saying they're just not coming back to work for sub-minimum low wages. And so many of them are young workers who are being educated about their rights. They're using social media. There's been like viral TikToks about the conditions of restaurant workers circulating, and that's inspired workers to join this movement of simply walking out of work or saying, this is not a shortage of workers, it's a shortage of good paying jobs. So I feel like it truly is this generation that was mentioned in the question that is getting informed about their rights, getting educated, and then taking action by standing up for themselves in the workplace. And so they're being proactive. And so that gives me hope that the future is positive. It's led by female identifying folks and trans folks and LGBTQ folks, and they're standing up for their rights in the workplace. And that's huge. So I would just say, continue to do that, continue to get educated on your rights at the workplace. One thing that I mentioned to you, Mariah, that I forgot to mention in my remarks is that we've done a look at the longitudinal effects of women's first jobs in the workplace being in the service sector and how that follows them throughout their career. So the sexual harassment and abuse that they experience in the early stages of their career, that becomes tolerable in the norm. So we've taken a look at women's impacts. And so the more that we can do to stop these effects on women now, the decreases the long-term effects of this being normalized in the workplace and acceptable and tolerable as far as becoming the norm. So love that question. Continue to get involved and know your rights and take action.
Terrific, terrific. If there's nobody else, we're going to go on to Jamora's second and final question.
What is your advice for getting people in power to listen to younger voices and students like me?
Should we take that in different ways? I think we can kind of go down. So I'd like to start with you, Sarah. I would like to go through everybody because you talk about such different segments. So some of us here are looking at the big picture conversation and how essential it is to have these big picture conversations. And then some of us are like really targeted and something that we can take a hatchet to. So in that context, what would you recommend? I mean, there are a lot of people in power, obviously, who've not put breasts on mannequins before.
A lot, yes, not really a common activity. I mean, I think it's building on what everyone else has said on this panel so far, and it's speaking out, it's being clear in your beliefs, it's using your social media channels, it's going into school and taking these issues. And, you know, I think you just said that someone is going to play this entire recording at their school assembly. That is just an incredible action of bringing this thinking across into more people's lives, into more people's orbits, really encouraging the conversation everywhere we can. I mean, for the mannequin specifically, it's tough because it's a very grassroots style movement that we need, right? We actually need CPR trainers on the ground to take the normal processes of teaching CPR and to introduce these solutions in to really get rid of this gender inequality. So for this specifically, it's working with any CPR teams. You know, there might be one in school, there might be one in your local town. It's sending the link, maybe getting a mannequin made. They're pretty cheap. Actually, when we first started the mannequin, there was a high school that we were talking to who did an after-school program where they all sewed mannequins. So they downloaded the design from the website and they just used that design, got together in their sewing class, and they sent us loads of pictures of everyone with sewing machines, just sewing these pieces together. You know, because we use neoprene, but you can use really any material you have. I think they were using just, you know, pieces of cotton that were left over from their sewing class. So something like that, of really taking this issue and trying to solve it. You know, it doesn't have to be solved on a giant national scale by every individual. It's these tiny actions and movements that when they are grouped together will really make an impact and a difference.
Kami and Vivi, please help to remind me to send this entire thing to Design and Architecture Senior High, which is another public, they've got an amazing program, and people who think like this, they invite us in every year to talk about these kinds of issues. I can see it now. Yay. Yeah. Morgan, how would you apply that question?
Yeah, Mar, I feel like a broken record a little bit, but I really do mean what I say, that young people have such important stories to tell. And I think it may seem a little difficult to tell your story, that you have to be a great public speaker or know the strategies, or but I really think it is as simple as sharing with your friends and with your family how you feel about something, how something impacted you, and really just thinking about and talking about your own personal impact on these particular issues, whatever issue it is that you care about, whether it is CPR training or menstrual equity or one fair wage or access to education or student loan debt. I really think it is about sharing in community how these different things are really impacting you and what your fears are and what your hopes are and what your dreams are, and building community around you. I really love to build community around me with people who are kind of on my same level, kind of that peer to peer, because other students and people around your age can feel for you and can empathize with you and can really support you, and you all can support each other, and really building community with folks who are who empathize with you and really have invested interest in what you're talking about, what you're sharing. Together, you all can really make change, and that's starting as small as maybe, you know, creating a TikTok on the issue and like making that go viral, or starting a school club, or volunteering at a local shelter, or doing a period product drive in your school. These are all really simple things that you can do with your friends and with your family.
Simple, but you got to do them. People who show up and take action. That's it. That's this kind of people. Shamila.
Would it be okay if, so I don't know if others want to reply to that question, but I wanted to reply to Debbie's question in the chat. So maybe we can.
Jennifer, did you have something to say on this question? Because yeah, we really want to talk about Debbie's question, but Jennifer, did you have something?
No, I think everybody's covered it really well. I think our voices are clear on this one, that your voices matter.
Cool. So Jamila's referring. So Debbie Bussell is actually the volunteer co-chair of our Return to Grants Committee. And our grants committee has volunteers like the CEO of the YWCA South Florida, the CEO of Overtown Youth Center, the executive director of Miami Workers Center, amazing community partners who are the busiest people in town, volunteering their time to help us put these gears together. And when we return to grant making, all of these brilliant people, different ages there too, that those aren't the only folks who are there, decided that the gaps and needs in early childcare and learning were what we were going to address in this first one. So Debbie has a great question here, and Jamila talked about it in our pre-interview. Really amazing stuff. So Debbie's question is, would love to hear about any fair wage work being done in the child care center. Take it away, Jamila.
Yeah, so mothers of color in particular, we know are bearing this primary responsibility for childcare and household duties. And during the pandemic, these factors have just gotten so much worse, with economists talking about this as a she session. And we've heard from workers all the time who are saying, when you work for sub-minimum wages, the math simply doesn't add up because you are not making enough to even cover childcare and transportation and all the things that go along with simply just getting to work. And then on top of that, you go there and you're experiencing harassment and gender-based discrimination and pregnancy discrimination, all that. We heard from a worker who works at Darden, one of the bad players in the NRA, as I mentioned, restaurant, the Olive Garden in Times Square. And she told us that Olive Garden's slogan is, when you're here, you're family, but when you're here, you can't have a family. You can't afford to have childcare. You can't afford to be, making any, there are no concessions for you as a pregnant worker, as a mom. And one thing that gives me hope is this Care Can't Wait campaign that the National Women's Law Center and the USOW has put together. I linked it here. And we've done a lot of research too, One Fair Wage, as far as the lack of access, and our predecessor, Rock United, for workers to access night care, because there's very few providers that operate on the schedule in which tipped workers work. In order to have the higher wage earning shifts, you have to work at night, right? A lot of moms work during the day in more casual fine dining restaurants while their kids are at school, but they're making maybe a third less, and that contributes to the gender pay gap. And so opening up access in the community to childcare, affordable childcare, is huge. And then there's one last thing that I want to mention, because it comes up so much, and I feel like it's a film that I saw just before the pandemic. It was like the last major event that I went to right before the pandemic hit, and it like stuck with me all throughout the pandemic as we're having these conversations around gender inequity. I encourage everybody to see it who hasn't. It's called The Great American Lie, and it's the third film in a series of documentaries by Jennifer Siebel Newsom, the first partner of California. And it takes a look into how our American economy inherently values things that are masculine, like prisons and jails and the military, and it inherently devalues things that are considered feminine, like care work, child care and home health care aides and service industry workers and nurses and teachers, who all, have predominantly or high number of women and women identifying folks working in those sectors. And I've just thought about it. It could, it came out just before the pandemic, but it couldn't be more true as far as the things that our society valued during the pandemic, and saying to moms, good luck, expecting you to go to work and show up for work when you were caring for young children or an elderly parent or relative at home. So I encourage everybody to check out The Great American Lie film if you haven't seen it already, and check out the Care Can't Wait campaign and support our work. We'd love to do more research around childcare in Florida specifically.
And we want that research, and we want it on our dashboard, and we're serious is the only heart attack we want women to have. We're serious as that heart attack. That's amazing. That's amazing. So much to talk about, and we hope to continue the conversation with you. Some of our partners, like the Lotus House, for example, who house over 500, formerly homeless women and their children at night. That's one of their biggest things, night care. Like if people are going out and they're getting jobs, how many people need that kind of night care? And Malia is here for ladies, the same kind of thing. You really need to meet people where they are, meet people's needs where they are. Absolutely essential. We have questions coming in from different places, but I'm going to go, since Debbie Bussell is the good woman and put them in the Q&A. We're going to go with that. And this one's for you, Sarah. Debbie says, I've been exploring ways to push for the manufacture of life jackets that allow for breasts, so women would have access to more comfortable jackets. Probably wear them better, I would think too. That's right. Might you be able to help with this?
It's so funny, isn't it, how many things in society have been built without 50% of the population in mind. It's truly, truly mind-blowing. I know this was such a big thing that came up at the start of COVID with PPP as well. People didn't have the right protective equipment because it just hasn't been designed for women. So yes, totally. Let's talk. I think you have my details. Let's have a conversation about it. Maybe some of the designs that we use for mannequin could be useful there, but I love that idea.
Amazing, amazing. Another side question that's been sent to me separately, and this is really for you, Jennifer. So Women's Funding Network colleagues have some great initiatives on allowing unsold products to be donated, just like sort of food that hasn't been used, and that's state by state regulation. Do you know anything about that campaign or initiative?
No, sorry, I really don't. And it's funny because even with the, I've been involved with a couple of collection drives locally, but mostly have focused my attention on policy as a purposeful direction. I would love for these policies to eventually make the thought of having to do this collection, irrelevant, or something that we don't actually have to rely on. But I'm sorry to say I don't actually have that information, so I can't answer that.
Well, good. Well, something we may be able to share back with you one of these days. Megan, maybe you can help us to do that. We actually have another question that was also for you, Jennifer. I'm getting things on text in all kinds of places. Question is, you've said that you focus on policy, but you also do a lot of writing. Can you talk about the importance of journalism in the public square?
Oh, I'm so glad to be asked that. Yes. And I'm not a journalist, to be clear. I'm very much an opinion writer, and somebody who is not necessarily, I'm not reporting. I am absolutely infusing my own opinion and my own agenda into everything that I write. But that actually really is rooted, I think, in much of the mission here at the Brennan Center, where we are a law and policy organization, but we focus as well on scholarship to undergird the kinds of proposals that we make. And that we think also that as a matter of creating and making not just legal change or policy change, but full on social and societal change, that it is as important to, move people's hearts and minds as it is to, create the technical framework for making these policy or legislative changes. And it's not just everyday people whose minds need to be changed or moved or inspired or fueled, but it's also, quite frankly, people in leadership, including everybody who is influential and makes decisions. For legislators in particular, they need to not just know that there's a problem and a solution, but that their constituents support this solution and will have their back, and will make it so that they can succeed in championing the cause. So a lot of the writing I do is focused on all of those different influence levers in our society. So I write for a wide variety of places, knowing that they have different readerships and different, so it's a different voice needed and a different way of communicating the message. And it's what's kind of amazing about, I think, the the internet is, and this is going back to even sort of the voice of young people, is that there's still sort of the papers of record and the notion that major national, international newspapers are the most influential places to have your say. But I think the internet has democratized our full marketplace of ideas. And there are opportunities to write on your own, to write for Medium, to really to do very detailed threads on Twitter where you can communicate those messages just as effectively. But I write for a wide variety of places. I write for major national news resources. I write for women's magazines. I write for feminist blogs. And all of them are important at reaching a wide variety of audiences. I mentioned that I wrote a book. So I wrote that book in 2017. I have to be honest, I never wanted to write a book. I was not even interested in writing the book. And a publisher came to me saying they really thought it needed to be a book, and they persuaded me to do it. 4 years later, the book was published in 2017. And 4 years later, I'm really, really glad that I sort of made that investment, because it has become, sort of a set in place, even though it was only it's now kind of outdated, in fact, but at the time it really sort of created what the blueprint, what the work plan could be for a movement that made sense at the moment. And it still has deep resonance, and it has just sort of a solidity, that's a word, that other forms of writing maybe, can sort of come and go. So I'm a deep, deep believer in the power of the written word as a form of advocacy and as a tool for advocacy. And I'm more than happy to talk to young folks who see that as a tool that they would want to have in their box of skills as well.
Terrific and inspiring. I'm going to just highlight Stacy Waite's comment to everybody, but directly to Debbie, and I guess this is for you, Sarah, as well. My women in co-ed yacht racing teams had that same problem. We found the spin lock and PFDs work great for women when on boats like sailing or racing, and use one for offshore racing. And West Marines are less expensive, but made for men's bodies, not women. So, right, that's a pink tax. So as we've been saying, the pink tax is not just an economic, it's applied to the price that we pay for being invisible women, right? So when you don't put the gender lens, we always say, here in our women's funds, similar to what you all say, Morgan. So we come here in their village plaza. What do we have in common? We come from north, south, east, west. We're coming into our central village plaza here in Miami-Dade County. What do we have in common? We're here ready to put on our gender lenses and look, because we were missing all this stuff if we didn't just stop and look, right? So we stop and look. So it's the same, and we're going to talk in a minute a little bit about messaging, Morgan, but first, we have another question, and that is about our heat campaign. So two of you we want to talk to both of you of these gears. Morgan, you talked about how some things we don't do everything ourselves, right? The United States of Women isn't saying that we're experts in everything, same as the Women's Fund. Well, what are we? We're the ones who do that, shed that unrelenting light and focus Hollywood spotlight on these issues so we all can see, and then see who's best fit to leverage. So one of these very self-same impact collaboratives happened a year ago. We were talking to some of our colleagues of Balaka Development Corporation and Catalyst, who work with economic mobility and changing people's lives generationally. And they were saying, listen, we are dealing with heat because it's affecting our clientele and it's getting in people's way of their economic mobility. So long story short, one of these was formed, heat and how it's affecting women and girls. We looked at the panelists who came together, who really are the experts, and came with recommendations about the effects of extreme heat on pregnant people, which was then taken up as some policy leaders heard it, because a committee from the city of Miami said, yes, we would like you to come and present there because your recommendations are interesting. As a collaborative, bringing the experts together, that applied a gender lens to our city emergency management response, adding pregnant people. It's gone to both mayors being with us at a big press campaign and releasing of a heat and extreme heat during the hot months here. That has been living with us. Viviana Alvarado Pacheco, who you can't see on screen, but is a big part of our team and our leader here, put together this amazing campaign, working collaboratively with 14 other groups. But we really couldn't find a place to drive people. Human Rights Watch has amazing information, close collaborators, but we ended up putting that on our website. So everybody's like, why do you have an extreme heat and pregnancy page on your website? It's because it needed to be built. It doesn't need to live here forever. We're working with many, many different organizations, and we hope that you all would help to take this nationally as well. We were invited to speak to the National March of Dimes Summit 2 weeks ago, because wherever these campaigns come from, this one's coming from Miami because we started talking about it, but they don't need to live and to stay here. So who else was talking about the heat campaign, or heat in Florida? It's you, Sarah, right?
Yeah, well, I was talking about, we had a brief so Potential Energy Coalition, don't know if you guys know them, they are awesome. It is a group that brings together disparate creative agencies and thinkers to go, hey, we have amazing creative minds here. How can we really turn this creative power to solving the issue of climate change? And like, we're under no illusions, we're not going to solve the issue of climate change, but at least bring certain pieces to the fore, really work with targeted audiences. And one of the things we work with them on is identifying key groups who are very, very specific audiences that we can target very, very specific messages to. For example, a campaign we just did was to moms. So moms who are kind of on the fence about climate change, and just a message very, very specifically directed to them. But this was a specific campaign to talk to Floridians who are kind of on the fence, and specifically young Floridians, about climate change. And, you know, normally discussions about climate change have the Arctic and polar bears and things that people really feel have no relevance to them. And so we took it's also very serious, right? Climate change conversations are very serious and can be very upsetting. And it's sometimes a bit of a turn off to people. People don't want to hear about bad news. And so we decided to take a very different angle and use the meme Florida man as a way in to talk about climate change. So instead of saving the polar bears, who, you know, may be meaningless to you, save Florida man. And it was a whole campaign to save Florida man. There was a film, we actually got a guy who was one of the Florida man memes to be in the work. He was amazing. He just was so funny. We, you know, made posters that you could download to carry on climate marches with you of, you know, save Florida man. So it's taking a big issue and really focusing on a very specific audience and bringing a message in a slightly unexpected way, right? Not a big lofty statement, but something that actually resonates and is absolutely shareable. So shareable. Some people share this film and this content all over the internet. So that was what we did. And you can check it out. If you go on joancreative.com, there's a whole case study and it's super funny. So I recommend that.
We most certainly will. And we'll share our not very funny extreme heat and pregnancy campaign, so you can give us your insights, because we want other people to take this away. So we'll share that too. One of our amazing board members and huge leader in this community, Deanne Connolly Graham, did post something here about somebody who was killed by, gender violence. Recent tragedy highlights the issues of sexual harassment for our restaurant workers. Beautiful young girl stabbed to death this week by a coworker who was harassing her for months with no intervention from her employer. And how horrific that is. It's amazing, Deanne. Thank you for sharing that. That's why we need to keep up this work. And that was just really the final question we had. Morgan, it's not always so easy. You all took this from the White House, and then you all took this, a gender lens on everything message. Sometimes people are like, aren't you all taking on too much at the Women's Fund? And yeah, because there's a lot to take on. So it's the small, really clear wins. It might be the extreme heat and pregnancy campaign, or where to go. There's always something you can do when domestic violence crosses your path, or human trafficking. But there's also the big picture. How do you give us your message as we end up here today.
Yeah, I think some people would say that about the United States of Women as well, that we are taking on a little too much, and kind of what is our lane and why aren't we focusing on one issue? But what we've learned is that the work is in unity. We have this call every Friday with some of the national leaders across the women's movement that uh, work on their particular issues day in and day out, and that is everything from Shamila joins those calls, so like one fair wage, to paid leave for all, to childcare, to domestic violence. And if we kind of stay in those silos, the work will not get done. But if we are communicating, we are supporting each other, and we are learning about the intersections of all of our issues, we all can work together to make change on all of our issues together. And so I think that we all have even in our own individual lives, we all have very complex lives, and so many things are impacting us at once, and nothing is only happening at one time. And that is so crucial to the work, to understand that nothing happens in a silo. And so that it is important to really raise awareness to all gender and racial justice issues, so that we can really make sure that we are all thriving and all making change that impacts all women, girls, and marginalized gender.
Couldn't have been better said. We thank everybody for being here, your valuable time, your amazing messages. This is going to go far. Thank you for those who support our grand mission, All Stronger Together. We come here together the first Thursday of every month to do incredible things and conversations that don't ever stay here. They go onto our network. So in January, 2022, we will see you for, is it really true that freedom from violence does equal health and well-being? Well, a lot of us think that it does. So thank you all. And please all stay connected. Panelists, thank you.
Thank you so much for having us. Thanks everybody for participating.
Thanks to everybody. Lead on.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Vivi, you want to come on screen? Thank you, Jennifer, for your time. So appreciative.